DeAndre Hopkins. So according to Jordan Schultz, Cardinals are planning to trade him as they clean house. Hopkins is going to turn 31 in June. He has 2 years left on his deal. He would carry a cap hit of $19.45 million next season, second most among wide receivers behind only Tyreek Hill. And then it's just under $15 million in 2024, when I think you could have the cap getting close to, but not right at, $300 million. So I think that number is going to be until 2025. But again, we're getting up there. The thing to know about Hopkins, who, again, suspended last year, missed the first 8 games, still had 64 catches, 717 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 96 targets. Pretty sure that led the league over the second half of the year, is that he is a no-trade clause. So before we jump into any of the how or the when or the why, nothing, zero, nada happens unless DeAndre Hopkins says, okay, yeah, okay there. So he'll be involved in these trade talks, I have to assume, between ownership and all the different trade partners, which are going to come after him because the cap is going up. Some teams, particularly GMs that are a little bit on the hot seat, are just going to say, we'll spend now and deal with the problem later. That kind of mindset is eventually going to get you into some trouble, which is why I've said this for months now. I think the Patriots are going to spend. I don't think it will be anything close to what they did 2 years ago. And that's where there's also a hang up here, because the Patriots historically, and this is our best guide, what they've done before for what they're going to do next, do not pay a premium for wide receivers. They might surrender an asset, like a first-round pick for Brandon Cooks or a second-round pick for Wes Welker, but they don't invest significant cap space in wide receivers. They didn't do it for Cooks. They didn't do it for Wes Welker, which is why Welker left. They didn't do it for Randy Moss, even after Randy Moss set the single-season record for receiving touchdowns, okay? So they're not going to do it for DeAndre Hopkins, who turns 31 in June. Now, of course, Belichick loves DeAndre Hopkins. And if you didn't hear it in the press conference leading up to that Cardinals game, when he called Hopkins, quote, every bit as good as anybody I've ever coached against, and drew a comparison to Chris Carter, there was a snippet, shout out HBO's Hard Knocks, which, again, the Cardinals, like, the Colts did this. Some teams have different attitudes. Even if I would be more media friendly on the inside of a building because of obviously my media experience, I do not understand the motivation behind letting a camera crew in for an entire freaking season. Anyway, thanks to that camera crew, we got a glimpse of Belichick talking to DeAndre Hopkins before that game. Belichick told him, I'm glad we only have to play you every 4 years. What a career you're having. You missed half the season, still going to lead the league in receiving. Hopkins says, I love you, man. Pause for the, Belichick said, you too, you too. Okay, so let's dream. You're in charge of the Patriots front office. We're working together. Should the Patriots try to trade for DeAndre Hopkins? Abso-freaking-lutely. We already talked about the cap space, the effective cap space in terms of they have to fill out a whole roster, and you don't know who the players, with all the free agents you have now, 40 through 53 might be. But say you fill those spots with at least minimum slots, the Patriots should be around $45.46 million, according to Over the Cap. Okay. So we talked about Hopkins' contract. His number would be $19.45 million, eating up close to, but not half of, 45.46, which is what the Patriots are looking at, according to Over the Cap. Their draft capital, because again, if you're going to get Hopkins, you got to give something out. And the Cardinals, because they're rebuilding, are probably going to want picks, is among the top 8 teams in the league. That's not, your number of first or second round picks or day 1 and day 2 picks. It's your total capital you're looking at. So the Patriots don't have as much money they can move around. They might have to ask Hopkins, or would want to ask Hopkins, because again, they don't pay top dollar for receivers, to lower that figure. The question is, does DeAndre Hopkins want to come here? Now, before we get to that, let's look at his other options, because of course, he's going to look at this in context, and so should we. I would expect, based on cap space in the situation of these franchises, that the following teams who either have more cap space or better draft capital than the Patriots are at least going to make a phone call. And those teams are, and there's not a big list. Again, the Patriots' 4th most cap space, top 8 in terms of draft capital. These teams are better in one of those 2 areas. The Falcons, the Bears, the Colts, and the Steelers. A couple of those teams we know will pay top dollar for a receiver based on very recent team history. Now, another team I didn't mention that is above the Patriots in both draft capital and cap space, I think we can rule out because that's the Texans, and I don't think DeAndre has fond memories of his last year or two there. Other teams I would be wary of, not because they have more cap space or draft capital than the Patriots, but because they're at least in the neighborhood and they can move their books a little bit better than the Patriots can in terms of prorating guaranteed or money that's flexible on their books now and pushing it into the future. If it's guaranteed now, it's locked in, or if it's a signing bonus, nothing the Patriots can do about it. These teams are the Chiefs, the Packers, the Lions, the Ravens, and this is my personal favorite on the outside for Hopkins, is the Giants. Because general manager Joe Schoen was in Buffalo when the Bills traded for Stephon Diggs. And he saw the power of pairing Diggs, a verified number one, with an up-and-coming quarterback. Say we will about Daniel Jones. I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy, but that makes all the sense in the world to me, looking at the Giants and what they might need, depending on whatever the situation is there, of course, with Kenny Galladay's contract. So the question you need to ask before, again, we get into how he would fit in the Patriots and how much cap space do they have left and where would he be in the offense is, will they be the top bidder? Because they need to outbid, most likely, or at least half of this list, the Falcons, Bears, Colts, Steelers, Chiefs, Packers, Lions, Ravens, and Giants, okay? Take half of those teams off. We're probably forgetting or not including some. The Saints are always somehow in the mix, even though they have no picks and no current cap space, but all the flexibility in the world in terms of their future books. And we know they're going to push money forward because, okay, let's say the Patriots are the top bidder, and let's get back to something I raised before. Are they an attractive enough destination for DeAndre Hopkins? Because as much as Belichick showered him with affection, and not just in the press conference where we know that happens all the time, but on the field, if you're Hopkins, you look at this team and go, okay, who's my quarterback? It's Mac Jones. All right, like he played fine in Arizona. And I think that impression is important in person. Mac was also, as we know, having a fit on the field, going to and from the sidelines, which is really the lasting memory of that whole Monday night game. Last year, because of the quarterback situation, some uncertainty, Odell Beckham Jr. told the world that, hey, Brady was there, I probably would have gone to New England. And maybe it was lip service. I asked him during the Super Bowl Zoom. That's what he said. But the Patriots are also 25-26 the last 3 years. You can't keep having these seasons 8-9, 10-7, 7-9, and not expect some of the sheen to come off Belichick and the brand of New England. That's 3 years, 25-26. So what is the big sell to DeAndre Hopkins? Obviously, it starts with Belichick. It starts with money. You say, okay, bring your $19.45 million cap hit with you. We'll fit you in. We'll move some other stuff around. Well, who's the OC? I mean, I'm not as high on Kingsbury being an option as some because people trace him all the way back to New England. Look, if we paired people with future jobs based on jobs they had 19 years ago, I am ready to be in line as a babysitter and a little league umpire anytime. Put me in there. I don't think that's going to happen for me. All right. Kingsbury, being the Patriots' backup quarterback in 2003, does not qualify him for being their offensive coordinator in 2023. Now, Kingsbury is from an air raid system. Perhaps Belichick's a little bit more open to adjusting his system. We'll see. That's a different conversation. But the other name that I think we all agree is a little bit more likely, even if it's less than 50%, is Bill O'Brien. And if Bill O'Brien is here, DeAndre Hopkins is not coming. So between the bidders, the available cap space and draft capital in the situation and the conversation with Hopkins, who again has a no trade clause, these are all things to consider. I don't want to be a wet blanket. I don't want to put out the embers and the fire and the excitement and the enthusiasm, but you just have to think through all of that before we get to, oh, he's definitely going to be here. Someone announced it. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, and I don't think it's going to happen. But we're going to have fun and we're going to dream.